In Saudi Arabia and Israel, the Scud attacks continued, and so did the search for their mobile launchers.
And now the pilot is maneuvering to drop laser-guided bombs on this target. There are a total of 11 vehicles in this area, and all of these are already loaded with Scud missiles. As you can see, these have already been fired. The flight lead now clears his number 2 man in to drop an area denial munition to take care of the remainder of the 4 vehicles that were on this side of the road.
Because of the continuing success of the Patriot missile defense, there was a growing confidence that the few Scuds the Iraqis were able to fire would never reach Earth intact.
As I think we've clearly seen so far, the Scud is nothing more than a terror weapon. It has no military significance, and if it's continued to be used the same way it's been used in the past, it absolutely has no military significance at all. Politically, frankly, it shouldn't have a significance. I think that, unfortunately, it's taken on more significance than it should. Obviously, no one likes to have their country attacked by anything, and no one likes to feel that their population is in danger. And I'm not being the least bit facetious when I say this, but saying that Scuds are a danger to your nation is like saying that lightning is a danger to your nation, because I frankly would be more afraid of standing out in a lightning storm in southern Georgia than I would be standing out in the streets of Riyadh when the Scuds are coming down. If it's going to hit you, it's going to hit you, but the percentages are so much less.
Then one night, with the war almost over, a Scud on its way to Dhahran broke up in flight. There was a flash on the horizon as part of the weapon struck the earth.
One of these ambulances has to go up there. All the people are up here.
You can see it. It's total. The whole thing's gone. Everybody in it is either wounded or dead.
How many people were inside?
About 130 maybe. There's 53 for sure. That was my unit. They're gone.
The death toll from this one random hit on a U.S. Army barracks on the outskirts of Dhahran was 28. The ground war continued. There was no live television from the battlefield, but when the tapes returned, we began to get an idea of the massiveness, the swiftness, and the violence of the attack. After suffering 6 weeks of intense bombing from the air and with poor food, uncaring leadership, and low morale, the Iraqi army began to emerge from their holes in the desert to give up.
Okay. Now, kneel down. Get down.
لا ما بيه بس واحد معك.
All right. You're all right. All right. Okay. Calm down. Okay. No. No. Okay. It's all right.
Let's go.
All right, let's go look over here and figure out what we got. Who's this? No, all the way down. All the way down. They came out of the fence, right?
Take off.
We got people going around searching everything.
Stand up.
Quiet.
Hey, they put this stuff back in. Yeah. Make sure they put the shit back in your pockets.
Look up. Look up. Close your eye. Close your eye.
Before long, there were so many thousands of Iraqi prisoners in Allied hands, they could not be counted.
The POWs, when we initially interrogated them, said that when the airstrikes hit these positions last night, their officers left and went north. That suggests that they got a big-time morale problem. Their leadership's leaving the soldiers.
Yeah.
One group of prisoners, in their rush to surrender, gave themselves up to CBS News correspondent Richard Threlkeld and his camera crew.
Fingers on your head, down.
He's got a bad leg.
Okay. Okay, up. Okay.
Tell him to sit.
Go ahead.
Just sit.
You can stand up. You can stand up.
Okay, sit down.
Okay.
Okay. Sit.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
وياكم وياكم اخذونا وياكم وين لا نسوي
We've had a number of prisoners when they've come across. The first words that they give us are, you know, President Bush, yes, President Bush, we love him. Saddam, and they spit, you know, and it sends a very clear message to us that they'd rather be on our side.
وخر النار شويه
The Iraqis withdrew so fast that on the third day of the ground war, CBS News correspondent Bob McEwen and his crew were able to outdistance our own advancing troops and travel the main highway right into Kuwait City. When they arrived, they set up a portable satellite dish and beamed to the world the first reports from a joyful nation on the verge of liberation.
Dan, I'm here, and I think from this day forward, history will record that Independence Day here in Kuwait, certainly here in Kuwait City, will be February the 26th, 1991. The irony is that yesterday was Kuwait's National Day, February the 25th. I think a change may be in order.
This is really one of the most remarkable things I've been through. I think when we came down the highway and realized we could get to the Capitol yesterday was the second greatest thrill I had after the birth of my son, and today's right up there as well. People are just jubilant that 7 months on Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi army is over and that life can get back to normal finally here in Kuwait.
I think, my God, please, to Bush,
يلا شعي
Let me show you something now that's just a few yards beyond our camera, out there in the dark, along the beach. Proof positive that this is still a war zone. Now, this had been something called Shrimpy's Restaurant by the Sea. The water's right out there with a long, blonde beach. Shrimpy's Restaurant by the Sea became, in effect, a bunker for Iraqi troops with their SAM missiles. They had their anti-aircraft batteries up here. This is from where they would fire the SAM missiles, had their telephone communications. Right up here on this rooftop, looking right out toward the sea, over here. This is their bunker in here. I want to be a little careful to make sure none of this is wired booby trap work. These are their launchers, their SAM missile launchers. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. Careful, Chris. Filled with the SAM missile. Box after box. Doesn't take much imagination to see the Iraqis in here. They're looking day and night, out to the sea, out this way, up to the sky. They'd be using their SAM missile launchers to knock down the planes, using their machine gun and other weapons nests up on this roof to spray Marines that they were obviously convinced were going to come charging in on those beaches. And this is right on the beach, a command bunker. Holes to fire out of here. Clips of 7.62 ammunition, Soviet-made fragmentation grenade. This one's secure, the pin's out of it. Concussion grenade. Come on in here. A lot of this stuff is marked Jordan. Clip after clip. Fast feeding. Careful where we put that down. The intention was to make what's out front of this command bunker a killing ground for Marines. Everywhere along this beach. Small trenches, foxholes, deep, long, interconnected trenches. And up here, an anti-aircraft gun emplacement. And in the sandbagged emplacement, your standard anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, dug in deep, pointed toward the sea and skyward. They had a lot of these in here. All around the edges, sound bags, and these rounds. Some of them are green, tracers or flares. Lots of ammunition stacked up here. Some of it spent. They'd fired this gun a couple of times at least. A couple of times they fired it. Not very well maintained equipment. It is in fact in appalling condition. And a lot of the Iraqi equipment we see, not only is it old, looks like something maybe left over from World War I, but it's atrociously maintained and not very well cleaned. And a little hole for the gunner
so when he took incoming, he could hide and survive. Sandbags, bricks, wood, then dug in deep into the sand.
On the third day of the ground war, with his army destroyed and in flight, it had become obvious that Saddam's mother of all battles had become, as the world was calling it now, the mother of all retreats. How did a coalition of unlikely allies achieve this incredible victory so fast? In what is now known as the mother of all briefings, U.S. General Norman Schwarzkopf laid it all out with his clear explanation of the brilliant strategy and execution which had forced Saddam's giant war machine to disintegrate on the battlefield.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I promised some of you all a few days ago that as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I would give you a complete rundown on what we were doing and, more importantly, why we were doing it, the strategy behind what we were doing. I've been asked by Secretary Cheney to do that this evening, and so if you will bear with me, we're going to go through a briefing. I apologize to the folks over here who won't be able to see the charts, but we're going to go through a complete briefing of the operation. This goes back to 7 August to 17 January. As you recall, we started our deployment on the 7th of August. Basically, what we started out against was a couple of 100,000 Iraqis that were in the Kuwait theater of operation. I don't have to remind you all that we brought over initially defensive forces in the form of the 101st, the 82nd, the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division, the 3rd Armored Cavalry, and in essence we had them arrayed to the south behind the Saudi task force. Also, there were Arab forces over here in this area, arrayed in defensive positions, and that, in essence, is the way we started. In the middle of November, the decision was made to increase the force because by that time, huge numbers of Iraqi forces had flowed into the area, and generally in the disposition as they're shown right here, and therefore we increased the forces and built up more forces. I would tell you that at this time, we made a very deliberate decision to align all of those forces within the boundary looking north towards Kuwait, this being King Khalid Military City over here. So we aligned those forces so it very much looked like they were all aligned directly on the Iraqi positions. We also at that time had a very active naval presence out in the Gulf, and we made sure that everybody understood about that naval presence. One of the reasons why we did that is because it became very apparent to us early on that the Iraqis were quite concerned about an amphibious operation across the shores to liberate Kuwait, this being Kuwait City. They put a very, very heavy barrier of infantry along here, and they proceeded to build an extensive barrier that went all the way across the border, down and around and up the side of Kuwait. So basically, the problem we were faced with was this. When you looked at the troop numbers, they really outnumbered us about 3 to 2. And when you consider the number of combat service support people we have, that's logisticians and that sort of thing in our armed forces, as far as fighting troops, we were really outnumbered 2 to 1. In addition to that, they had about 4,700 tanks versus our 3,500 when the buildup was complete, and they had a great deal more artillery than we do. I think any student of military strategy would tell you that in order to attack a position, you should have a ratio of approximately 3 to 1 in favor of the attacker. And in order to attack a position that is heavily dug in and barricaded, such as the one we had here, you should have a ratio of 5 to 1 in the way of troops in favor of the attacker. So you can see basically what our problem was at that time. We were outnumbered as a minimum 3 to 2 as far as troops were concerned. We were outnumbered as far as tanks were concerned, and we had to come up with some way to make up the difference. Next chart, please. I apologize for the busy nature of this chart, but I think it's very important for you to understand exactly what our strategy was. What you see here is a color coding where green is a go sign or a good sign as far as our forces are concerned. Yellow would be a caution sign, and red would be a stop sign. Green represents units that have been attrited below 50% strength. The yellow are units that are between 50 and 75% strength, and of course the red are units that are over 75% strength. What we did, of course, was start an extensive air campaign, and I briefed you in quite some detail on that in the past.
One of the purposes I told you at that time of that extensive air campaign was to isolate the Kuwaiti theater of operation by taking out all the bridges and supply lines that ran between the north and the southern part of Iraq. That was to prevent reinforcement and supply coming into the southern part of Iraq and the Kuwaiti theater of operation. We also conducted a very heavy bombing campaign, and many people questioned why the extensive bombing campaign. This is the reason why. It was necessary to reduce these forces down to a strength that was that made them weaker, particularly along the front line barrier that we had to go through. We continued our heavy operations out in the sea because we wanted the Iraqis to continue to believe that we were going to conduct a massive amphibious operation in this area. And I think many of you recall the number of amphibious rehearsals we had, to include Imminent Thunder, that was written about quite extensively for many reasons. But we continued to have those operations because we wanted him to concentrate his forces, which he did. I think this is probably one of the most important parts of the entire briefing I could talk about. As you know, very early on, we took out the Iraqi Air Force. We knew that he had very, very limited reconnaissance means, and therefore when we took out his Air Force, for all intents and purposes, we took out his ability to see what we were doing down here in Saudi Arabia. Once we had taken out his eyes, we did what could best be described as the Hail Mary play in football. I think you recall when the quarterback is desperate for a touchdown at the very end, what he does is he steps up behind the center, and all of a sudden every single one of his receivers goes way out to one flank, and they all run down the field as fast as they possibly can and into the end zone, and he lobs the ball. In essence, that's what we did. When we knew that he couldn't see us anymore, we did a massive movement of troops all the way out to the west, to the extreme west, because at that time we knew that he was still fixed in this area with the vast majority of his forces, and once the air campaign started, he would be incapable of moving out to counter this move, even if he knew we made it. There were some addition of troops out in this area, but they did not have the capability nor the time to put in the barrier that had been described by Saddam Hussein as an absolutely impenetrable tank barrier that no one would ever get through. I believe those were his words. So this was absolutely an extraordinary move, I must tell you. I can't recall any time in the annals of military history when this number of forces have moved over this distance to put themselves in a position to be able to attack. But what's more important, and I think it's very, very important that I make this a point, and that's these logistics bases. Not only did we move the troops out there, but we literally moved thousands and thousands of tons of fuel, of ammunition, of spare parts, of water, and of food out here into this area, because we wanted to have enough supplies on hand so that if we launched this and we got into a slugfest battle, which we very easily could have gotten into, we'd have enough supplies to last for 60 days. It was an absolutely gigantic accomplishment, and I can't give credit enough to the logisticians and the transporters who were able to pull this off, to the superb support we had from the Saudi government, the literally thousands and thousands of drivers, really of every national origin, who helped us in this move out here. And of course, great credit goes to the commanders of these units who were also able to maneuver their forces out here and put them in this position. But as a result, by the 23rd of February, what you found is this situation. The front lines had been attrited down to a point where all of these units were at 50% or below. The second level, basically, that we had to face, and these were the real tough fighters that we were worried about right here, were attrited to some place between 50 and 75%, although we still had the Republican Guard located here, and part of the Republican Guard in this area that were very strong, and the Republican Guard up in this area strong. And we continued to hit the bridges all across this area to make absolutely sure that no more reinforcements came into the battle. This was the situation on the 23rd of February. Next, please. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I shouldn't forget these fellows. That SF stands for Special Forces. We put Special Forces deep into the enemy territory. They went out on strategic reconnaissance for us, and they let us know what was going on out there, and they were the eyes that were out there, and very important that I not forget those folks. Next, please. This then was the morning of the 24th. Our plan initially had been to start over here in this area and do exactly what the Iraqis thought we were going to do, and that's take them on head-on into their most heavily defended area. Also, at the same time, we launched amphibious feints and naval gunfire in this area so that they continued to think that we were going to be attacking along this coast and therefore fix their forces in this position. Our hope was that by fixing the forces in this position and with this attack through here in this position, we would basically keep the forces here and they wouldn't know what was going on out in this area. And I believe we succeeded in that very well. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the Marines, the 1st Marine Division and the 2nd Marine Division, launched attacks through the barrier system. They were accompanied by the the Tiger Brigade, U.S. Army Tiger Brigade of the 2nd Armored Division. At the same time over here, 2 Saudi task forces also launched a penetration through this barrier. But while they were doing that, at 4 o'clock in the morning over here, the 6th French Armored Division, accompanied by a brigade of the 82nd Airborne, also launched an overland attack to their objective up in this area, Al Salman Airfield. And we were held up a little bit by the weather, but by 8 o'clock in the morning, the 101st Airborne Air Assault launched an air assault deep in the enemy territory to establish a forward operating base in this location right here. Let me talk about each one of those moves. First of all, the Saudis over here on the East Coast did a terrific job. They went up against a very, very tough barrier system. They breached the barrier very, very effectively. They moved out aggressively and continued their attack up the coast. I can't say enough about the 2 Marine divisions. If I use words like brilliant, it would really be an under-description of the absolutely superb job that they did in breaching the so-called impenetrable barrier. It was a classic, absolutely classic military breaching of a very, very tough minefield, barbed wire, fire trenches type barrier. They went through the first barrier like it was water. They went across into the 2nd barrier line. Even though they were under artillery fire at the time, they continued to open up that breach, and then they brought both divisions streaming through that breach. Absolutely superb operation, a textbook, and I think it'll be studied for many, many years to come as the way to do it. I would also like to say that the French did an absolutely superb job of moving out rapidly to take their objective out here, and they were very, very successful, as was the 101st. And again, we still had the special forces located in this area. What we found was as soon as we breached these obstacles here and started bringing pressure, we started getting a large number of surrenders. And I think I talked to some of you all about that this evening when I briefed you on the evening of the 24th. We found we got a large number of surrenders. We also found that these forces right here were getting a large number of surrenders and were meeting with a great deal of success. We were worried about the weather. The weather turned out was going to get pretty bad the next day, and we were worried about launching this air assault. And we also started to have a huge number of atrocities of really the most unspeakable type committed in downtown Kuwait City, to include reports that the desalinization plant had been destroyed. And when we heard that, we were quite concerned about what might be going on. Based upon that and the situation as it was developing, we made a decision that rather than wait the following morning to launch the remainder of these forces, that we would go ahead and launch those forces that afternoon. Next. So this was a situation you saw the afternoon of the 21st. The Marines continued to make great progress going through the breach in this area and were moving rapidly north. The Saudi task force on the East Coast was also moving rapidly to the north and making very, very good progress. We launched another Egyptian Arab force in this location and another Saudi force in this location, again to penetrate the barrier, but once again to make the enemy continue to think that we're doing exactly what he wanted us to do, and that's make a headlong assault into a very, very tough barrier system, a very, very tough mission for these folks here. But at the same time, what we did is continued to attack with the French. We launched an attack on the part of the entire 7th Corps where the 1st Infantry Division went through, breached an obstacle and minefield barrier here, established quite a large breach through which we passed the 1st British Armored Division. At the same time, we launched the 1st Armored Division, the 3rd Armored Division, and because of our deception plan and the way it worked, we didn't even have to worry about a barrier. We just went right around the enemy and were behind him in no time at all. And the 2nd Armored Cavalry Division. And I ought to talk, and the 24th Mech Division also launched out here in the far west, and I ought to talk about the 101st because this is an important point. Once the 101st had their forward operating base established here, they then went ahead and launched into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley. There's a lot of people who are still saying that the object of the United States of America was to capture Iraq and cause a downfall of the entire country of Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, when we were here, we were 150 miles away from Baghdad, and there was nobody between us and Baghdad. If it had been our intention to take Iraq, if it had been our intention to destroy the country, if it had been our intention to overrun the country, we could have done it unopposed for all intents and purposes from this position at that time. But that was not our intention. We had never said it was our intention. Our intention was purely to eject the Iraqis out of Kuwait and to destroy the military power that had come in here. So this was the situation at the end of February the 24th in the afternoon. Next, please. The next 2 days went exactly like we thought they would go. The Saudis continued to make great progress up on the eastern flank, keeping the pressure off the Marines on the flank here. The Special Forces went out and started operating small boat operations out in this area to help clear mines, but also to threaten the flanks here and to continue to make them think that we were, in fact, going to conduct amphibious operations. The Saudi forces that came in and took and Arab forces that came in and took these two initial objectives turned to come in on the flank heading towards Kuwait City, located right in this area here. The British UK passed through and continued to attack up this flank, and of course the 7th Corps came in and attacked in this direction as shown here. The 24th Infantry Division made an unbelievable move all the way across into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley and proceeded in blocking this avenue of egress out, which was the only avenue of egress left because we continued to make sure that the bridges stayed down. So there was no way out once the 24th was in this area, and the 101st continued to operate in here. The French, having succeeded in achieving all of their objectives, then set up a flanking position, a flank guard position here to make sure that no forces could come in and get us from the flank. By this time, we had destroyed or rendered completely ineffective over 21 Iraqi divisions. Next, please. And of course, that then brings us to today. Where we are today is we now have a solid wall across the north of the 18th Airborne Corps, consisting of the units shown right here, attacking straight to the east. We have a solid wall here again of the 7th Corps, also attacking straight to the east. The forces that they are fighting right now are the forces of the Republican Guard. Again, today we had a very significant day when the Arab forces coming from both the west and the east closed in and moved into Kuwait City, where they are now in the process of clearing Kuwait City entirely and assuring that it's absolutely secure. The 1st Marine Division continues to hold Kuwaiti International Airport. The 2nd Marine Division continues to be in a position where it blocks any egress out of the city of Kuwait so no one can leave. To date, we have destroyed over 29, destroyed or rendered inoperable. I don't like to say destroyed because that gives you the visions of absolutely killing everyone, and that's not what we're doing. But we have rendered completely ineffective over 29 Iraqi divisions, and the gates are closed. There is no way out of here. There is no way out of here, and the enemy is fighting us in this location right here. We continue, of course, to have overwhelming air power. The air has done a terrific job from start to finish in supporting the ground forces, and we also have had great support from the Navy, both in the form of naval gunfire and in the support of carrier air. That's the situation at the present time. Next, please. Peace is not without a cost. These have been the U.S. casualties to date. As you can see, these were the casualties that we had in the air war. Then, of course, we had the terrible misfortune of the Scud attack the other night, which, again, because the weapon malfunctioned, it caused death, unfortunately, rather than a proper function. And then, of course, these are the casualties in the ground war to death, the total being as shown here. Next. Hold it, hold it, hold on for 1 second. 1 second is up. Next, please. We'll put all these charts that have them available for you afterwards. Now, I would just like to comment briefly about that casualty chart. The loss of one human life is intolerable to any of us who are in the military. But I would tell you that casualties of that order of magnitude, considering the job that's been done and the number of forces that are involved, is almost miraculous as far as the light number of casualties. It'll never be miraculous to the families of those people, but it is miraculous. Anyhow, this is what's happened to date with the Iraqis. They started out with over 4,000 tanks. As of today, we have over 3,000 confirmed destroyed, and I do mean destroyed or captured. And as a matter of fact, that number is low because you can add 700 to that as a result of the battle that's going on right now with the Republican Guard. So that number is very, very high, and we've almost completely destroyed the offensive capability of the Iraqi forces in the Kuwaiti theater of operation. The armored vehicle count is also very, very high, and of course you can see we're doing great damage to the artillery. The battle is still going on, and I suspect that these numbers will mount rather considerably. Next. I wish I could give you a better number on this, to be very honest with you. This is just a wild guess. It's an estimate that was sent to us by the field today at noontime, but the prisoners out there are so heavy and so extensive, and obviously we're not in the business of going around counting noses at this time to determine precisely what the exact number is. But we're very, very confident that we have well over 50,000 prisoners of war at this time, and that number is mounting on a continuing basis. I would remind you that the war is continuing to go on. Even as we speak right now, there's fighting going on out there. Even as we speak right now, there are incredible acts of bravery going on. This afternoon, we had an F-16 pilot shot down. We had contact with him. He had a broken leg on the ground. 2 helicopters from the 101st, they didn't have to do it, but they went in to try and pull that pilot out. One of them was shot down, and we're still in the process of working through that. But that's the kind of thing that's going on out on that battlefield right now. It is not a Nintendo game. It is a tough battlefield where people are risking their lives at all time, and they're great heroes out there, and we ought to all be very, very proud of them. That's the campaign to date. That's the strategy to date, and I'd now be very happy to take any questions anyone might have. Yes, sir.
I want to go back to the air war. The chart you showed there with the attrition rates of the various forces was almost the exact reverse of what most of us thought was happening. It showed the frontline troops attrited to 75% or more, and the Republican Guards, which a lot of public focus was on when we were covering the air war, attrited less than 75. Why is that? I mean, how did it come to pass?
Put that chart up again, Roger, will you please? Let me tell you how we did this. We started off, of course, against the strategic targets, and I briefed you on that before. At the same time, we were hitting the Republican Guard. But the Republican Guard, you must remember, is a mechanized armor force for the most part that is very, very well dug in and very, very well spread out. So in initial stages of the game, we were hitting the Republican Guard heavily, but we were hitting them with strategic type bombers rather than pinpoint precision bombers. For lack of a better word, what happened is the air campaign shifted from the strategic phase into the theater, and we knew all along that this was the important area. The nightmare scenario for all of us would have been to go through, get hung up in this breach right here, and then have the enemy artillery rain chemical weapons down on troops that were in a gaggle in the breach right there. That was the nightmare scenario. So one of the things that we felt we must have established is an absolute, as much destruction as we could possibly get of the artillery, the direct support artillery that would be firing on that wire. That's why we shifted it in the very latter days. We absolutely punished this area very heavily because that was the first challenge. Once we got through this and we're moving, then it's a different war. Then we're fighting our kind of war. Before we get through that, we're fighting their kind of war, and that's what we didn't want to have to do. At the same time, we continued to attrit the Republican Guard, and that's why I would tell you that again, the figures that we're giving you are conservative. They always have been conservative, but we promised you at the outset we weren't going to give you anything inflated. We're going to give you the best we had. Yes, sir. Right.
You seem to have about, he seems to have about 500 or 600 tanks left out of more than 4,000, as just an example. I wonder if in an overview, despite these enormously illustrative pictures, you could say what's left of the Iraqi army in terms of how long could it be before he could ever be a regional threat or a threat to the region again?
Well, there's not enough left of it at all for him to be a regional threat to the region, offensive regional threat. As you know, he's got a very large army, but most of the army that is left north of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley is an infantry army. It's not an armored army. It's not an armor-heavy army, which means it really isn't an offensive army. So it doesn't have enough left unless someone chooses to rearm them in the future.
You said you've got all these divisions along the border which were seriously attrited. It figures to be about 200,000 troops, maybe, that were there. You've got 50,000 prisoners. Where's the rest of them?
There was a very, very large number of dead in these units, a very, very large number of dead. We even found them when we went into the units ourselves and found them in the trench lines. There were very heavy desertions. At one point, we had reports of desertion rates of more than 30% of the units that were along the front here. As you know, we had quite a large number of POWs that came across, and so I think it's a combination of desertions, there's a combination of people that were killed, there's a combination of the people that we've captured, and there's a combination of some other people who are just flat still running. Yes, sir.
It seems that you've done so much that the job is effectively done. Can I ask you, what do you think really needs more to be done? Because his forces are, if not destroyed, certainly no longer capable of posing a threat to the region. They seem to want to go home. What more has to be done?
Put the last chart up, please. The last arrow, the large arrow. If I'm to accomplish the mission that I was given, and that's to make sure that the Republican Guard is rendered incapable of conducting the type of heinous act that they've conducted so often in the past, what has to be done is these forces continue to attack across here and put the Republican Guard out of business. We're not in the business of killing them. We have PSYOPs aircraft up. We're telling them over and over again, all you got to do is get out of your tanks and move off, and you will not be killed. But they're continuing to fight, and as long as they continue to fight, we're going to continue to fight with them. Yes, back here.
General, that move on the extreme left, which got within 150 miles of Baghdad, was it also part of the plan that the Iraqis might have thought that it was going to Baghdad, and would that have contributed to the deception?
I wouldn't have minded at all if they'd gotten a little bit nervous about it. I really, and I mean that very sincerely. I would have been delighted if they'd gotten very, very nervous about it. Frankly, I don't think they ever knew it was there. I think they never knew it was there until the door had already been closed on them. Yeah, right through here.
General, I'm wondering how much resistance there still is in Kuwait. And I'm wondering what you would say to people who would say the purpose of this war was to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and they're now out. What would you say to that public that is thinking that right now?
I would say that there was a lot more purpose to this war than just get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. The purpose of this war was to enforce the resolutions of the United Nations. There's some 12 different resolutions of the United Nations, not all of which have been accepted by Iraq to date, as I understand it. Okay? But I got to tell you that in the business of the military, of a military commander, my job is not to go ahead and at some point say, well, that's great, they've just now pulled out of Kuwait. Even though they're still shooting at us, they're moving backwards, and therefore I've accomplished my mission. That's not the way you fight it, and that's not the way I would ever fight it. Back in the back, please.
Yeah, so you talked about heavy press coverage of imminent thunder early on and how it helped fool the Iraqis into thinking that it was a serious operation. I wondered if you could talk about other ways in which the press contributed to the campaign.
I don't want to. I would rather not. First of all, I don't want to characterize imminent thunder as being only a deception, because it wasn't. We had every intention of conducting amphibious operations if they were necessary, and that was a very, very real rehearsal, as were the other rehearsals. I guess the one thing I would say to the press that I was delighted with is in the very, very early stages of this operation, when we were over here building up and we didn't have very much on the ground, you all were giving us a credit for a whole lot more over here. And as a result, that gave me quite a feeling of confidence that we might not be attacked quite as quickly as I thought we were going to be attacked. Other than that, I would not like to get into the remainder of the question. Over here. Yes, sir.
General, what kind of fight is going on with the Republican Guard? And is there any more fighting going on in Kuwait, or is Kuwait essentially out of the action?
No. The type of fight that's going on with the Republican Guard right now is just a classic tank battle. You've got fire and maneuver. You've got they are continuing to fight and shoot at us as our forces move forward, and our forces are in the business of outflanking them, taking them from the rear, using our attack helicopters, using our advanced technology. I would tell you that one of the things that has prevailed, particularly in this battle out here, is our technology. We had great weather for the air war. But right now and for the last 3 days, it's been raining out there, it's been dusty out there, there's black smoke and haze in the air. It's an infantryman's weather. God loves the infantryman, and that's just the kind of weather the infantryman likes to fight in. But I would also tell you that our sights have worked fantastically well in their ability to acquire, through that kind of dust and haze, the enemy targets. And the enemy sights have not worked that well. As a matter of fact, we've had several anecdotal reports today of enemy who were saying to us that they couldn't see anything through their sights, and all of a sudden their tank exploded when their tank was hit by our sights. So that's one of the indications of what's going on. Yeah.
Could I ask you two questions? First, did you think that this would turn out? I realize a great deal of strategy and planning went into it, but when it took place, did you think this would turn out to be such an easy cakewalk as it seems? And secondly, what are your impressions of Saddam Hussein as a military strategist?
First of all, if we thought it would have been such an easy fight, we definitely would not have stocked 60 days worth of supplies on these log bases. So, as I've told you all for a very, very long time, it is very, very important for a military commander never to assume away the capabilities of his enemy. And when you're facing an enemy that is over 500,000 strong, has the reputation that they've had of fighting for 8 years, being combat-hardened veterans, had the number of tanks and the type of equipment they had, you don't assume away anything. So we certainly did not expect it to go this way. As far as Saddam Hussein being a great military strategist, he is neither a strategist, nor is he schooled in the operational art, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he as a soldier. Other than that, he's a great military man. I want you to know that. Back here.
General, I wonder if you could tell us anything more about Iraqi casualties on the battlefield. You said there were large numbers. Are we talking thousands, tens of thousands? I mean, any more scale that you can give us?
No, I wish I could answer that question. As you can imagine, this has been a very fast-moving battle, as is desert warfare. And as a result, even today when I was asking for estimates, every commander out there said, we just can't give you an estimate. It went too fast. We've gone by too quickly. Yes, Rick.
You went over very quickly the special operations folks. Could you tell us what their role was?
We don't like to talk a lot about what the special operations do, as you're well aware. But in this case, let me just cover some of the things they did. First of all, with every single Arab unit that went into battle, we had special forces troops with them. The job of those special forces was to travel and live right down at the battalion level with all those people to make sure that they could act as the communicators with friendly English-speaking units that were on their flanks, and they could also call in airstrikes as necessary. They could coordinate helicopter strikes and that sort of thing. That's one of the principal roles that they played, and was a very, very important role. Secondly, they did a great job in strategic reconnaissance for us. Thirdly, the special forces were 100% in charge of the combat search and rescue, and that's a tough mission. When a pilot gets shot down out there in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by the enemy, and you're the folks that are required to go in and go after them, that is a very tough mission, and that was one of their missions. And finally, they also did some direct action missions, period. Yes.
General, there have been reports that when the Iraqis left Kuwait City, they took with them a number of the Kuwaiti people as hostages. What can you tell us about this?
We've heard that they took up to 40,000. I think that you've probably heard the Kuwaitis themselves who were left in the city state that they were taking people and that they have taken them. So I don't think there's any question about the fact that there was a very, very large number of young Kuwaitis, males, taken out of that city within the last week or two. But that pales to insignificance compared to the absolutely unspeakable atrocities that occurred in Kuwait in the last week. They're not a part of the same human race, the people that did that the rest of us are. I've got to pray that that's the case. Yes, sir.
General, not to take anything away from the Army and the Marines who made the breaching maneuvers.
I hope you don't.
But many of the reports and the pools we've got from your field commanders and the soldiers were indicating that these fortifications were not as intense or as sophisticated as they were led to believe. Was this a result of the pounding that they took that you described earlier, or is it they were perhaps overrated in the first place?
You ever been in a minefield?
No.
All there's got to be is one mine, and that's intense. Okay? There were plenty of mines out there. There were plenty of barbed wire. There were fire trenches that most of which we set off ahead of time, but there were still some that were out there. The Egyptian forces had to go through fire trenches. There were a lot of booby traps, a lot of barbed wire. Not a fun place to be. I got to tell you, probably one of the toughest things that anyone ever has to do is to go up there and walk into something like that and go through it, and consider that while you're going through it and clearing it, at the same time you're probably under fire by the enemy artillery. That's all I can say.
As tough as that was it less severe than you had even expected? I mean, were you expecting even worse?
It was less severe than we expected, but one of the things I attribute that to is the fact that we went through extensive measures to try and make it less severe. Okay, and we really did. I didn't mean to be facetious with my answer. I just got to tell you that is a very tough mission for any person to do, particularly in the minefield. Yes, sir.
General, is the Republican Guard your only remaining military objective in Iraq? And I gather there have been some heavy engagements. How would you rate this army you faced from the Republican Guard on down?
Rating an army is a tough thing to do. A great deal of the capability of an army is its dedication to its cause and its will to fight. You can have the best equipment in the world, you can have the largest numbers in the world, but if you're not dedicated to your cause, if you don't have a will to fight, then you're not going to have a very good army. One of the things that we learned towards right prior to the initiation of the campaign that of course contributed, as a matter of fact, to the timing of the ground campaign is that so many people were deserting, and I think you've heard this, that the Iraqis brought down execution squads whose job was to shoot people, okay, in the front lines. And I got to tell you what, a soldier doesn't fight very hard for a leader who is going to shoot him, okay, on his own whim. That's not what military leadership is all about. And so I attribute a great deal of the failure of the Iraqi army to fight to their own leadership. They committed them to a cause that they did not believe in. They all are saying that they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to fight their fellow Arab. They were lied to. They were deceived, and when they went into Kuwait, they didn't believe in the cause. And then after they got there, they had a leadership that was so uncaring for them, okay, that they didn't properly feed them, they didn't properly give them water, and in the end, they kept them there only at the point of a gun. So I can't, now the Republican Guard is entirely different. The Republican Guard are the ones that went into Kuwait in the first place. They get paid more, they get treated better, and oh, by the way, they also were well to the rear here, okay? So they could be the first ones to bug out, okay, when the battlefield started folding, while these poor fellows up here who didn't want to be here in the first place bore the brunt of the attack. Well, that didn't happen. Yes, sir.
Yes, General, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned about the Saudi army forces. Could you elaborate about their role in the first day?
Yeah, the Saudi army, as I said, the first thing they did was we had this marine attack that was going through here, and of course we were concerned about the forces over here again hitting the flanks. That's one of the things you just don't want to have happen to your advancing forces. So this force over here, the Eastern Task Force, had to attack up the coast to pin these enemies in this location. The forces, again, the Saudi forces over in this area were attacked through here, again, to pin all the forces in this area because we didn't want those forces moving in this direction and we didn't want those forces moving in that direction. It's a tough mission, okay, because these people were being required to fight the kind of fight that the Iraqis wanted them to fight. It's a very, very tough mission. I would point out it wasn't only the Saudis. I tell you, it was the Saudis, it was the Kuwaitis, it was the Egyptians, it was the Syrians, it was the Emiris from the United Arab Emirate, it was the Bahrainis, it was the Qataris, and it was the Omanis. And I apologize if I've left anybody out, but it was a great coalition of people, all of whom did a fine job. Back here, please.
General, could you tell us, in terms of the air war, of how effective you think it was in speeding up the ground campaign? Because obviously it's gone much faster than you ever expected. And as a second part of that, how effective do you think the air-land battle campaign has been?
The air war obviously was very, very effective. You just can't predict about things like that. You can make your best estimates at the outset as to how quickly you will accomplish certain objectives. But of course, a lot of that depends upon the enemy and how resilient the enemy is, how tough they are, how well dug in they are. In the earlier stages, we made great progress in the air war. In the latter stages, we didn't make a lot of progress because, frankly, the enemy had burrowed down into the ground as a result of the air war. Now, that, of course, made the air war a little bit tougher, but when you dig your tanks in and bury them, they're no longer tanks. They're now pillboxes. And that then makes a difference in the contribution in the ground campaign. When you don't run them for a long time, they have seals problems, they have a lot of maintenance problems and this sort of thing. So the air campaign was very, very successful and contributed a great deal. How effective was the air-ground campaign? I think it's pretty effective myself. I don't know what you all think. Right.
Could you tell us what you think, as you look down the road, would be a reasonable size for the Iraqi army? And can you tell us roughly what the size is now, if the war were to stop this evening?
With regard to the size right now, at one time Saddam Hussein was claiming that he had a 7 million man army. If he has a 7 million man army, they've still got a pretty big army out there. How effective that army is an entirely different question. With regard to the size of the army he should have, I don't think that's my job to decide that. I think that there's an awful lot of people that live in this part of the world, and I would hope that that is a decision that's arrived at mutually by all the people in this part of the world to contribute to peace and stability in this part of the world. I think that that's the best answer I can give, right there. I'm sorry, I'll get to you all in a minute. Yeah.
You said the gate was closed. Have you got ground forces blocking the roads to Basra?
No.
So is there any way that they can get out that way?
No. That's why the gate's closed. Right here, yeah.
Is there a military or political explanation as to why the Iraqis did not use chemical weapons?
We've had a lot of questions about why the Iraqis didn't use chemical weapons, and I don't know the answer. But I just thank God that they didn't.
Is it possible they didn't use them because they didn't have time to react and they were defeated?
Okay, you want me to speculate? I'll be delighted to speculate. Nobody can ever pin you down when you speculate. Number one, we destroyed their artillery. We went after their artillery big time. They had major desertions in their artillery, and the artillery that would have been, and that's how they would have delivered their chemical weapons, either that or by air, and we all know what happened to the air. So we went after their artillery big time, and I think we were probably highly, highly effective in going after their artillery. There's other people who are speculating that the reason why they didn't use chemical weapons is because they're afraid that if they use chemical weapons, there'd be nuclear retaliation. There's other people that speculate that they didn't use their chemical weapons because their chemical weapons degraded, and because of the damage that we did to their chemical production facilities, they were unable to upgrade the chemicals within their weapons as a result of that degradation. That was one of the reasons, among others, why we went after their chemical production facilities early on in the strategic campaign. I'll never know the answer to that question, but as I say, thank God that they didn't. Yeah.
In the United Nations General Assembly is talking about peace, and as a military man, do you look at your challenge and you're going to get some satisfaction out of having achieved it? Is there some fear on your part that there will be a ceasefire that will keep you from fulfilling the assignment that you have? Is your assignment as a military man, separate from the political goals of the...
Do I fear a ceasefire?
Do you fear that you will not be able to accomplish your ends, that there will be some political pressure brought on the campaign?
I think I've made it very clear to everybody that I just as soon the war had never started, and I just as soon never have lost a single life out there. That was not our choice. We've accomplished our mission, and when the decision makers come to the decision that there should be a ceasefire, nobody will be happier than me. All the way back in the back.
General, you've said many times in the past that you do not like body counts. You've also told us tonight that the enemy casualties were very, very large. I'm wondering, with the coalition forces already burying the dead on the battlefield, will there ever be any sort of accounting or head counts made or anything like that?
I don't think there's ever in the history of warfare been a successful count of dead. And one of the reasons for the reason you say, and that's because it's necessary to lay those people to rest for a lot of reasons, and that happens. So I would say that no, there will never be an exact count. You know, probably in the days to come, you're going to hear many, many stories, either overinflated or underinflated, depending upon who you hear them from. The people who will know best, unfortunately, are the families that won't see their loved ones come home. One more question right here. Yes, sir.
If the gate is indeed closed, as you've said several times, and the theories about where these Kuwaiti hostages are, perhaps Basra, perhaps Baghdad, where could they be? And a quick second question, was the timing for the start of the ground campaign a purely military choice, or it was a military choice with political influence on the final choice of date? That's right.
When I say the gate is closed, I don't want to give you the impression that absolutely nothing is escaping. Quite the contrary, what isn't escaping is heavy tanks, what isn't escaping is artillery pieces, what isn't escaping is that sort of thing. That doesn't mean that civilian vehicles aren't escaping, that doesn't mean that innocent civilians aren't escaping, that doesn't mean that unarmed Iraqis aren't escaping, and that's not the gate I'm talking about. I'm talking about the gate that is closed on the war machine that is out there. Now, your other question was?
For the beginning of the ground campaign.
Okay, the timing for the beginning of the ground campaign. We made military analysis of when that ground campaign should be conducted. I gave my recommendation to the Secretary of Defense and General Colin Powell. They passed that recommendation on to the President. The President acted upon that recommendation. Why, do you think we did it at the wrong time?
I'm wondering if your recommendation and analysis was accepted without change.
I'm very thankful for the fact that the President of the United States has allowed the United States military and the coalition military to fight this war exactly as it should have been fought, and the President in every case has taken our guidance and our recommendations to heart and has acted superbly as the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
In a desperate effort to salvage what he could from the fast-ending war, Saddam Hussein announced that his commanders had been issued orders to withdraw from Kuwait. But missing from his announcement was the acceptance of all United Nations resolutions. President George Bush would accept no less. The war continued. These gun sight pictures from the Department of Defense told the story of the Allied domination of the battlefield.
Okay, try a little bit of a delay on it. All right. Okay, disregard. Good, me too. Good. I'll figure out left foot. Nice. Are you recording this? Thank you. Yeah. All right. That's 1-4. I gotta have a grid to target there, guys. Good shot. Woo! 6-0's got a delta. I'm not sure which one he is. 8-5's and Queen on 2 and 3. Roger, it's 8-5. Yeah, 6-0-6. That's perfect. Ladies, can you get a hold of anyone? This half Wilson or this is 3 down here. Good shot. And my parts are sprayed. Big still. 7-2. 4-6-8-2. You took the top off of that book. 0. Roger, we got a whole bunch of guys throwing AK-47s up in the air down here. Does that mean anything? Don't shoot them, shoot their equipment. Not the AK-47s. Watch them. Okay, roger that. They're just, we're going to back away from them a little bit. Our gun is out of ammo at this time. Okay. They seem to be no threat at all. Okay, it's 065, 1,800 meters. Okay. See them guys keep walking towards me. Okay, mine. 62, 8-5. Our target.
Meanwhile, in Kuwait, enemy troops and tanks continued to be attacked by Allied forces as they fled northward on the road to Iraq's city of Basra. The outcome for what was left of Saddam's army was catastrophic. When he was certain Saddam's army was no longer a threat to its neighbors, George Bush declared victory.
I am pleased to announce that at midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, exactly 100 hours since ground operations commenced and 6 weeks since the start of Operation Desert Storm, all United States and coalition forces will suspend offensive combat operations.
Thank you. On Sunday, March 3rd, Saddam's representatives met General Schwarzkopf and the commander of the Saudi army in a tent in occupied Iraq. General Schwarzkopf said, "We were not there to negotiate. We were there to make certain our demands would be met."
The most important point that we discussed was the immediate release of all prisoners of war.
Within 48 hours, the first of the American POWs were on their way home. Among the returning prisoners were Lieutenant Jeffrey Zahn, whose battered face the world had seen on Baghdad television. Also released were the 2 women soldiers the Iraqis had captured. In Baghdad, 4 other prisoners were released as well. CBS's Bob Simon, his producer Peter Bluff, cameraman Roberto Alvarez, and soundman Juan Caldera. The mystery of what had happened to them that long ago day on the desert would now be told.
We weren't after the story of the war. We weren't after an enormous scoop. We just wanted to check out what was going on. And we drove up to the border to check up what was going on at that border, and we're checking out the other side of the customs post, no man's land, when the Jeep that changed our lives showed up and took us away.
What happened?
Peter saw it first, said there's a Jeep coming across the sands at us. I made a calculation, and I suspect my 3 friends made the same calculation. Can we run these 200 yards before the Jeep gets to us? My calculation was no. We started walking quickly back, but not running. The Jeep stopped, I'd say, 10 yards away. There were 3 men in it, 1 driver, who I think was the officer. He got out, and 2 guys with Kalashnikovs got out and started saying, "Peace, peace, peace." But then the guns were at us, and a hand came down on my head, and I was shoved into the Jeep. And there we were. My second interrogation came at the intelligence headquarters, when they brought me down, asked me my name, and said, "We consider you a spy." That was the only moment in the 40 days that I lost it. I said, "I'm not a spy. I'm a journalist. I've worked for CBS News for 25 years. An Army guy, a captain, he had 2 stars, which is a captain in the Iraqi Army. He grabbed me by the face, forced my mouth open, and said, "Yehudi, Yehudi," which means Jewish, and then spit at me and slapped me. This 6th instinct that every anti-Semite has ever had. Jew, dirty Jew. I didn't think he would shoot me. I could have killed him. I would have killed him if I could have. I would have killed him, and I would have had no more remorse than I had every morning when I got up and killed the cockroaches in my room.
Thank you.
On the 6th of March, 1991, a jubilant Congress invited the President to come to Capitol Hill to receive their thanks. Tap on the shoulder for Secretary of State Jim Baker. and the president keeps moving.
Mr. President, it is customary at joint sessions for the chair to present the president to the members of Congress directly and without further comment. But I wish to depart from tradition tonight and express to you, on behalf of the Congress and the country, and through you to the members of our armed forces, our warmest congratulations on the brilliant victory of the Desert Storm operation. Members of the Congress, I now have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
With the highest approval rating any president has ever registered, George Bush enjoyed the total victory he had demanded. It was a victory which America and its allies had won.
Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, thank you, sir, for those very generous words spoken from the heart about the wonderful performance of our military. Members of Congress, 5 short weeks ago, I came to this House to speak to you about the State of the Union, and we met then in time of war. Tonight, we meet in a world blessed by the promise of peace. From the moment Operation Desert Storm commenced on January 16th until the time the guns fell silent at midnight 1 week ago, this nation has watched its sons and daughters with pride, watched over them with prayer. As Commander-in-Chief, I can report to you our armed forces fought with honor and valor. And as President, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated, the war is over. Now we can see a new world coming into view, a world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. In the words of Winston Churchill, a world order in which the principles of justice and fair play protect the weak against the strong. A world where the United Nations, freed from Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders. A world in which freedom and respect for human rights find a home among all nations. The Gulf War put this new world to its first test. And my fellow Americans, we passed that test. For the sake of our principles, for the sake of the Kuwaiti people, we stood our ground, because the world would not look the other way. Ambassador El Saba, tonight, Kuwait is free. Where is it? We are very happy about that. Tonight, as our troops begin to come home, let us recognize that the hard work of freedom still calls us forward. We've learned the hard lessons of history. The victory over Iraq was not waged as a war to end all wars. Even the New World Order cannot guarantee an era of perpetual peace, but enduring peace must be our mission. We went halfway around the world to do what is moral and just and right. And we fought hard, and with others, we won the war. And we lifted the yoke of aggression and tyranny from a small country that many Americans had never even heard of. And we asked nothing in return. We're coming home now, proud, confident, heads high. There is much that we must do, at home and abroad, and we will do it. We are Americans. May God bless this great nation, the United States of America. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, guys.
And so for America and most Americans, there was to be, after all, a happy ending. But as it was in all wars, it was not achieved without a human cost. The enemy lost tens of thousands killed. And although our own losses by comparison were low, there still was a total of 204 Americans who gave their lives in Desert Storm to free Kuwait. Television had personalized many of them, and so we felt their individual deaths almost as intensely as we might that of a close friend. In one of those tragic ironies of war, one soldier America had come to know, Major Marie Rossi, the first woman to fly into Iraq when the ground combat began, died when the helicopter she was piloting crashed the day after the fighting ceased.
I think this war will go down, at least from a military standpoint, much the same as the Blitzkrieg did in World War II. We fought a war using weapons, tactics, and maneuver that no one had ever fought. It was a textbook war. We'd done it only on the exercise fields, in simulations, and in war colleges. Nobody had ever fought one of these things. There are some other very big firsts in this war. One was the melding together of the services, all the air under one commander, all the ground forces under one commander. Now, in no war had we ever been able to overcome inter-service rivalry, right down on the battlefield. And here was what was up. There was more integration of Allied forces than the Allies had ever been able to achieve under the NATO structure. Nowhere had U.S. and Allied forces been able to come together and operate in such a way that they did here.
It's a great day to be a soldier. You were part of a great coalition. Despite the fact that you were vastly outnumbered, you were determined to show a petty dictator that they just can't get away with bullying their neighbors and taking what they want because they think they're so tough. We all paid a price, but we all share in that victory. It's hard for me to put in words how proud I am of you, how proud I have been to be the commander of this force. I'm proud of you. Your country's proud of you. The world's proud of you. God bless you, and Godspeed on your trip home. And God bless America.